Hello. Behind me here is St Luke's Church in Charlton, southeast London. The current church was built in 1630, and amongst its points of interest, it has a rather tragic place in political history, because amongst those buried here in the church is Spencer Perceval, the only British Prime Minister in history to have been assassinated. Now, most people with an interest in British political history will be familiar with that name, but I doubt whether many of them will know that the leader of the opposition at the time, who faced him across the dispatch box at the House of Commons, also met with a tragic end just a few years later. I'm Dr. Nigel Fletcher, and I'm a political historian. I'm also the author of a new book called The Not Quite Prime Ministers, telling the stories of all the many people who served as leader of the opposition, but failed to make it to 10 Downing Street. As I covered in the last video, Charles James Fox had dominated the political scene in Britain for over 20 years until his death in 1806. The following year, the Whig Party returned to opposition, and they were initially led in the Commons by Charles Grey, later Earl Grey, who would go on to become Prime Minister. But when he went to the House of Lords in November of that year, there was suddenly a vacancy for the leadership of the opposition in the lower house. And the man they went for was named George Ponsonby. And he was certainly an unexpected choice. Not only did many of his colleagues think that he wasn't up to the job, he himself agreed with them, saying that the leadership was, in his words, really above my qualifications. And a later historian also described him as a little-known mediocrity. But who was he? Well, first of all, he was Irish. The Ponsonby family were well-established landowners and aristocrats in Ireland, and his father, John Ponsonby, had been Speaker of the Irish House of Commons. After training as a lawyer, George followed his father into politics and also served in the Irish Parliament until the Act of Union in 1801 abolished it. And he then came to England and was elected to the newly unified Parliament of the United Kingdom, representing the Irish seat of County Wicklow. When the Whigs took office again in 1806, he was made Lord Chancellor of Ireland in the so-called Ministry of All the Talents, leaving the House of Commons and returning to Dublin to take up the post. He was only there for just over a year before the government fell, and he then found himself out of office as well as out of Parliament. And it was at that point that the vacancy arose for a new Whig leader of the opposition in the House of Commons. And nowadays we'd expect there to be some sort of leadership election with candidates competing for the top job. But in the early 19th century, things were rather less democratic. And what actually happened was that the great and good of the Whig Party met up at the Duke of Bedford's house on the 11th of December 1807 and formulated a good old-fashioned stitch-up. Now, there were plenty of people that they could have chosen, including, for example, Samuel Whitbread, who was an impressive speaker and also Earl Grey's brother-in-law, but he was felt to be too radical. Other better-known candidates were also ruled out for one reason or another, or declined the post, until the representatives of the great Whig families present eventually concluded that Ponsonby was the candidate who would provoke the fewest objections, and who could also be relied upon to do what he was told by the senior party leaders in the Lords. So, at the age of 53, George Ponsonby became leader of the opposition in the House of Commons, with the Duke of Bedford helpfully arranging a parliamentary seat for him by ensuring that he was elected as the MP for Tavistock. As he himself had predicted, Ponsonby was not a very impressive leader, and there was almost immediate talk of replacing him with another candidate. Party leadership plots are certainly nothing new in British politics. But despite the constant grumbling from the backbenchers, and also amongst his senior colleagues, he somehow clung on to office. He was therefore in office for two dramatic events of this period. First of all, in 1810, the final illness of King George III, which saw the king permanently incapacitated. Ponsonby played a central role in debates over the Regency Bill, and when the Prince of Wales then took power as the Prince Regent, we might have expected him to bring his old Whig friends into government, but he decided instead to keep his Tory ministers in place. Then in 1812, the Prime Minister, Spencer Perceval, was assassinated on his way into the chamber of the House of Commons. It was a huge shock to the political establishment, and Ponsonby spoke movingly in the chamber to pay tribute to his fallen rival. It was actually one of the few speeches that he made that was well received in the House. He continued as leader for the next 5 years, despite growing disquiet amongst his colleagues about his ineffective leadership. And then on the 30th of June 1817, tragedy struck again in the House of Commons. Ponsonby had just intervened to speak on a bill, appropriately perhaps, relating to the Irish legal system, and the Chancellor of the Exchequer was then on his feet, about to move the next business, when there was suddenly a commotion around the Speaker's chair. Ponsonby, on his way out of the chamber, had suddenly collapsed, with what seems to have been a stroke. The House was adjourned as desperate attempts were made to revive him, but to no avail. The Speaker's carriage was used as a makeshift ambulance to take the stricken leader back home, but he never recovered and died just a week later. The tragic irony is really quite striking. As leader of the opposition, Ponsonby had led tributes to a Prime Minister who had been mortally injured in the lobby at one end of the chamber of the House of Commons. And now, just 5 years later, he had himself been fatally struck down in the lobby at the other end of that very same chamber. After a somewhat undistinguished career, it was certainly a dramatic ending. So that's George Ponsonby, another leader of the opposition to not quite become Prime Minister. And if you want to know more about him, including reading the dramatic account of his demise from news reports of the time, you can read all of it here in the book, along with stories of all 43 other leaders of the opposition who didn't quite make it to number 10. It's published by Biteback on the 21st of September and available to order now. I'll be back with more videos like this one very soon, so make sure you've liked and subscribed to the channel and switch on notifications so that you don't miss the rest of the series. In the meantime, thanks for watching, look after yourself, and I'll see you again soon.